Violence, conflicts, inequalities, discrimination are worsening and generating humanitarian emergencies, increasing hunger, migration flows and vulnerabilities that mainly affect women, children and young people. It is the polycrisis. It is a perverse cycle aggravated by climate and environmental issues that strongly impacts the planet and the lives of its living beings. We need to design a different, fairer and more human world in which everyone participates with the same dignity. The Civil Seven believes in this. We believe that the solidarity becomes strength. The Civil Seven is one of the official engagement groups of the G7, and it represents the international civil society gathering the voice of more than 700 organizations from around 70 countries. Food justice, human mobility, climate, energy transformation, environmental justice, global health, sustainable development, economic justice, peace, are our topics of discussion and interlocution with the political world. What are we asking for? Just justice. Just social, environmental, and economic justice.
Solo justicia, nada más. This is a very simple political call, but also a very engaging and complex political call. And what does justice mean? How can we understand what we mean saying just justice? We are gathering today for this meeting in a wonderful town in Rome, and walking towards the FAO headquarters, probably you have seen the Circus Maximus, and you have seen the wall of the ancient Rome, the Palatine Hill. So we can use a reference from the history, from the story of this town, making reference to Ulpianus. He was one of the most important philosophers that made the foundations of the Roman law, and he wrote that justice is the recognition of rights for each, for all. And this is what we repeat now. Our call for justice is to make a reality the respect of human rights for each human being, for all, for everybody. A respect that is not actual, not current, not existing yet. Respect for all means at first the idea or the principle of universality. We are thinking about all human beings without frontiers. Second, respect of rights means or implies the fulfillment of duties. So implies a relation, implies something that we have to do and to build together. So the idea of universality is not only related to gathering everybody, but is also related to have a mutual effort. And that's the reason why, as a C7, we work with a constituency that comes from all over the world. The C7 is the official space of dialogue with the G7, with the 7 governments working together. And, but we are not coming just from the 7 countries. We are coming from all over the world. And we try to put together, to collect together the policy ask of all civil society from all countries, guided by this idea that our main goal is to make the human rights a reality. So we have to do it together, we do it together, and we always repeat to the G7, and we do the same in the perspective of the G20 and the Civil 20. We work together, Civil 20 and C7, and we repeat that our main space is the multilateral space of United Nations, and we ask, in this case, the G7, to help us in strengthening the multilateral frameworks of human rights. That's the reason why we are here. We thank the FAO to host this meeting, and we are very happy and even proud to be able to gather so many people in this room and a lot of people connected online with digital tools. In several languages to try to present the result of these months of work, our C7 Communique, that is a sort of synthesis of all the policy asked. And I repeat, we do it here in a UN headquarters, because at the UN, every citizen of the world can feel to be at home. And this is what we like for all our political sites and room. And also to underline and to thank the hospitality to FAO, but to show how relevant it is to be here. Today, we listen now to the speech, to the welcome speech of the Director General of the FAO, Chu Dongyu, who will be with us tomorrow in the afternoon for the closing session, but that send a message to us that we can see by video in this moment. Thank you.
Civil society leaders, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm pleased to welcome the participants of the Civil 7 Summit in the FAO headquarters. The Civil 7 is an important platform for engaging with the G7 on the key issues, such as promoting socio-economic development and well-being for all, ensuring access to the healthy diet, gender equality, and protecting the environment, among others. Priorities which support the FAO mandate. In particular, allow me to highlight the relevance of some of the C7 working group to FAO's mandate, such as climate, energy transformation, and environmental justice. Economic justice and transformation, global health, principled humanitarian assistance, and food justice and food system transformation. Furthermore, the FAO Strategy Framework 2022-31 supports the members for sustainable development through the transformation to more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life. The four betters, leaving no one behind. Civil society plays a fundamental role in supporting the advancement of the 2030 agenda by raising awareness and mobilizing societies at all levels towards the required efforts to achieve the SDGs target, ensuring alignment in this direction. An important example of civil society's contribution was the mobilization for the greater political commitment towards achieving the 1970 UN General Assembly resolution that established the goal for countries' official development assistance, ODA, of the minimum net amount of the 0.7% of its GDP. This is, however, still a long way to go forward meeting this target. The multiple layered crisis that we have been facing requires continued efforts to raise awareness, political support, mobilizing society, and financing resources to eradicate hunger and poverty. Civil society also plays a crucial role in the implementation of the principle of leaving no one behind, which is central to our agenda. It is required that we not only reach the poorest of the poor, but also combat discrimination and rising inequalities within and among the countries, addressing the root causes. Civil society organizations are crucial in supporting people's rights, promoting equality, and ensuring the accountability for implementation. The participation of civil society organizations in multi-stakeholder governance processes is important to give a voice to the most marginalized and to ensure the policy makers take into account the needs and the views of the poor and the vulnerable groups that do not have access to policy process. Civil society also plays a very important role in promoting the innovations for social inclusion. In Brazil, civil society organizations from the semi-arid region developed an approach for promoting decentralized access to the water, with an emphasis on harvesting rainwater, which then engaged 1 million rural families in the construction of the cisterns to store the rain-fed water and develop the capacities for agricultural production in semi-arid conditions. This proposal then became the public program that reached millions of rural households. Ladies and gentlemen, the principle of the leaving no one behind requires collective and coordinated actions for increased and targeted investment for rural development, and for empowering women, youth, indigenous peoples, and vulnerable groups to make their voice heard, to ensure that policies are responsive to their needs. EFA is committed to continue working closely with civil society in an efficient, effective, and coherent manner to achieve our collective objectives and ensure a better future for all, leaving no one behind. I wish you a fruitful C7 summit. Thank you.
Thank you to the FAO who is hosting us today, but thank you also to the UN SDG Action Campaign that also helped us in organizing this event. Marina Ponte is here with us today. We've been supported also by the Unione Buddhiste, the Buddhist Union of Italy, and our thanks also to them. And just a quick, well, how can I say, a quick game that we can say. If you can put on the screen the QR code, it can be useful or interesting to understand where we come from. And you can digit with your phone, you can answer to the question about the town where are you coming from, and a small sentence on the C7 and on this process. And this can be done by also our friends from home, so we can have an idea about how spread we are in this moment. Yeah, I would like to add one small thought. I think there is our logo there is on the desk here, or anyway, you see our logo almost everywhere. And you see that, did you do it? Are we ready? Julia, we have already the result. Yeah, not too widespread this moment. Yeah, someone from Brazil, that is interesting because it is very early in this moment. Even from Argentina or Uruguay, someone from Asia, of course a strong concentration from Europe, that is understandable. Yeah, someone from Africa, we have some African friends here in the hall. Yeah. I was saying, 2 words before starting the presentation of the communique. In our logo, you see a dove that is flying and in an effort to reach the olive branch. And this is a little bit what we think we are doing now. Peace is not something that just falls in your hands. Peace is an effort, is something that we have to build every day. We have to fly towards the olive branch. We can't simply keep the branch in our mouth. And this is what we try to do as a civil society when we share together the effort to reflect on the situation we are living and the political proposal. That's the reason why we are here today, and I would like to call here with me at the table some of the coordinators of the 7 working groups. The C7 is organized in 7 thematical working groups. Each working group has 2 coordinators, one from the hosting country, in this case from Italy, and one from the international space. So I would like to call here Maria Grazia Midulla from GCAP Italy, who is facilitating the process in Italy, and WWF Italy. Monica Di Sisto from GCAP Italy as well, and Fairwatch, who is coordinating the economic justice and transformation. Maria Grazia Midulla is coordinating the working group on climate, energy transformation, and environmental justice. Robin Montgomery from Canadian HIV Legal Network, coordinator of the Global Health Working Group. Please come here. And then Miro Modrusan from Intersos, coordinator of the Principal Humanitarian Assistance. So welcome, Miro. Francesco Vignarca from the Italian Network for Peace and Disarmament. And Francesco Aureli, co-spokesperson of GCAP Italy. All the Italian coordinators are from GCAP Italy and from a specific organization. GCAP is a network. And last but not least, of course, coordinator of Food Justice and Food System Transformation Working Group, Italo Rizzi from LVA. Then Valeria Emmi. Valeria is a co-spokesperson of GCAP Italy with Francesco Aureli, but what is most relevant is the C7 Sherpa on her shoulders. All this work has been done in these months, and please, Ambassador Elisabetta Belloni, the Sherpa of the G7 of the Italian government that is leading the presidency of the G7 this year. Thank you to be with us. And in this moment, the session to present the communique is starting. So I would like to ask Valeria to come here to have a short presentation on the content and the spirit of our communique. Of course, you can check and follow the communique using your QR code in your badge. Thank you. Please, Valeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Riccardo, and it's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to the Civil 7 Summit, a milestone of the Civil 7 process where we collectively advance the political dialogue with the G7. And I would like to thank most sincerely the Ambassador Belloni, G7 Sherpa, for being here exactly for this purpose, to build on a substantial conversation and debate on policies and practice. And indeed, this is a space for our voice to be meaningfully heard, to reaffirm the unique role of civil society, to hold decision makers to account, and be a cornerstone of the fight against inequality. Civil 7 catalyzes and adds significant value to policy debate by leveraging joint actions, knowledge, and solidarity. building on voices of those who are most excluded, the most vulnerable, and bringing them to the policy debate. And underpinning this vision is the centrality of human rights, international humanitarian law, and UN-centered multilateral process, which are essential to firmly advance on the pathway towards sustainability, recognizing the intersectionality of the health, climate, care, and socioeconomic challenges. Human rights are the ethical compass that makes it possible to design and share policies and paths without excluding anyone. They guide the relationship between right holders and duty bearers who have equal dignity and share common and differentiated responsibility. And in such a bond of solidarity and responsibility, we clearly set out our collective action and our demands to the G7. Under the framework of the human rights, we have been guided by 4 overarching goals and principles: the determination to leave no one behind, the necessity of a gender transformative approach, the need for a comprehensive vision for a real sustainability and peace, and the policy coherence to link together the future of the planet and all human beings. But we are living in a time of extraordinary and complex crisis with a long list of challenges, with increasing poverty, hunger, environmental degradation, gender inequalities, prolonged public-private indebtedness, economic shocks, and political instability. Violent conflicts, which are becoming increasingly severe and protracted, driving record humanitarian needs and record numbers of displaced people. So at the time of the poly crisis, of extraordinary and complex crisis, there is no room left for business as usual responses. These crises have been shown to exacerbate existing significant inequalities, exposing the systemic failures of the global order. In all these, the most vulnerable and the marginalized are worst affected, with disproportionately little voice and power. So the role of the G7 in our action needs to be firmly located in this analysis of the crisis and within the scope and scale of the responses that are needed, that are required with the utmost urgency, ambition, accountability, and concrete action. And the G7 countries have a crucial role and responsibility in demonstrating in practice their commitment in a new path of sustainability. So what the C7 calls for from the G7 global leadership is a paradigm shift in development with the democratic processes to address the root causes of the current poly crisis. So indeed, we are in a crisis, but in crisis there is always opportunity. And it's about opportunities that we channel our recommendations. And at the core of them, the ambition to ensure that all people have the power to realize their universal human rights through overcoming social, economic, and environmental crisis and exclusion, to collectively challenging and changing the system causing these, building systems which have human and planetary thriving at their heart, and create a steady, long-term and sustainable peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. We don't have a lot of time, so I immediately ask Ambassador Elisabetta Belloni to come here to have a say with us about the Italian priorities and a first reaction. You've already read our communique, so maybe you can even start sharing some thoughts. Then afterwards, we will present you some specific questions.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you all for inviting me at this session. It is indeed a great pleasure to be back at FAO. It brings me back to a very challenging period of my professional life, and I'm very pleased to recognize the faces of all friends sitting in front of me, friends with whom many years ago we started a dialogue which, I have to say, much to our regret, is still very much on the table. Nevertheless, I think that some lessons have been learned since then, lessons that I think will be duly reflected also in the approach that we are trying to promote as G7 presidency in our doing and in our document. It is my duty, first of all, to convey to you all the greetings of Prime Minister Meloni. I can assure you that she is following very carefully the preparation of the most important event of the Italian presidency. As you know, the presidency will hold the summit in June in Apulia, but it goes without saying that the presidency is an ongoing work which will last till the end of the year, so there is progress that can be achieved also after the summit. First thing I would like to tell you is that in the ambition of Prime Minister Meloni and of the Italian presidency, we would like to underline the fact that a document endorsed by the G7 should reflect an integrated approach, which is one of the lessons I was referring to before. So it will come to no surprise to you that in trying to outline the priorities that we are proposing as G7 presidency, we will touch upon a number of different issues that apparently are not linked with each other, but that definitely do have to be looked at in an integrated way, being aware that the one can have a tremendous impact on the others as well. It is also my duty to thank Civil 7 for the contribution, which we have already analyzed and studied. We had a number of meetings in my office with some representatives of Civil 7, and I already indicated that the recommendations will be taken into consideration in the year work that we are undertaking as the G7 presidency. I would like, first of all, to tell you that our ambition, as I said, is to promote an integrated approach. At the same time, we will try to avoid a repetition of achievements that have already been reached by previous presidencies. I'm very much aware of the difficulties of doing so. There are legitimate aspirations and ambitions by each country to promote what has been achieved during their own presidencies. But what I'm trying to say is that we will try to take stock of results already achieved in previous presidencies in order to make clear that the G7 work in a coherent way and in a way that would allow to build upon progress that has already been achieved by previous presidencies. So just to give you an example, certainly Africa is very much at the core of the priorities that Prime Minister Meloni has chosen for our own presidency, but it goes without saying that the priority that previous presidency of Japan put on the Indo-Pacific must be looked in an integrated way with the approach that we have to promote for Africa, and that the two different angles that have been proposed by these two presidencies should be looked as a whole and as one approach that is proposed in terms of standards by the G7. So the first thing I would like to convey to you is that in our ambition, we would like to make it clear with the communique that the G7 are a group of countries that share the same view in terms of democratic values and standards. And this is the first message that we would like to give to the world. And in doing so, of course, there is an open door to all like-minded countries that want to join us in affirming these principles. Of course, the first approach that we will take is to, also in light of the evolution that the G7 had throughout the years, starting in '75 as a group of industrialized countries that had to address a specific issue, the economic energy crisis. Now, of course, the world has changed, and the G7 do no longer represent the 70% economies of the world. Now we are representing only the 30%. Nevertheless, the spirit of coordination and solidarity and the same like-minded approach that the G7 had taken at that time has to be reproposed as a group of countries that affirms the same principles, but trying to reach out to the rest of the world, and in particular to the global south. Ukraine, of course, when we discuss at G7 level the crisis, the conflict areas, or the critical areas in terms of geopolitical concerns, Ukraine, of course, will be at the core of the G7 agenda. And our aim is to reaffirm the stand-fast support to Kiev. And of course, we have, as G7, already had an opportunity to make it clear where we belong and the terms of our support to Ukraine in the Leaders' VTC, which took place in February. 2 years after the beginning of Russia's war of aggression, we will continue to send a strong, unified message on the G7's unwavering support to Ukraine and to its people. When we started our term as G7 presidency last January, we hoped we could put more emphasis on the country's reconstruction, considering also that Italy will host next year the Conference on Reconstruction, but also considering that at the eve of the G7 summit in June, Berlin will host the Reconstruction Conference. Prime Minister Meloni stated that working on Ukraine's reconstruction is the best way to show our confidence in Ukraine's ability to overcome the conflict and to continue its path to the Euro-Atlantic integration. Unfortunately, as you all know, the situation on the ground remains critical, as Ukraine is still ravaged by Russia's war of aggression with Moscow, threatening the use of nuclear weapons. On this matter, I think that we have to counter Russia's narrative about the alleged double standards of the West. Indeed, we should highlight that Russia, with the support of China, continues to violate international law, and Moscow's weaponization of energy and food has had dire consequences, especially on the poorest countries of the world. And of course, one of the big challenges of the G7 in June will be the issue of how to finance the support that we have decided to continue to provide to Ukraine, not only in terms of its capacity to counter the aggression of Russia, but also in terms of making Ukrainian able to start the reconstruction and to fulfill, in terms of financial resources, its budget. During the summit, the leaders will continue to monitor the situation in Gaza, and more generally in the Middle East. Above all, keeping in mind the broader implications that this conflict can have on global security, economy, and trade. It's too early to predict what would be, what will be the outcome in terms of the declaration on this issue. As you all know, negotiations are still ongoing, but certainly the G7 will want to express their own view on the conflict, will certainly address the issue of the humanitarian aid, which is very much needed for the Palestinians. It will also try to express support for the negotiation efforts, and it will certainly say something about the need to avoid all forms of escalation, including the spreading of the conflict beyond Gaza. G7 leaders will also discuss at length the other challenges to the rule-based international system. In this regard, China is surely one of the biggest strategic challenges we will have to face in the coming decades. Our approach is based on the assumption that we should engage with China on the main global challenges, such as climate change. At the same time, we must confront China's assertiveness, balancing strong economic and trade relations with Beijing while ensuring our security on the economic front, but not only that. We are living in an era that someone has defined as deglobalization. As the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine suggest that the way to avoid economic cohesion is through the de-risking, reshoring, and friendly shore strategies. This will be another topic, certainly, that the leaders will want to discuss in Apulia. Our G7 presidency, as I said before, very much focuses on effectively engaging the global South and in particular Africa. As I said, in continuity with what has already been done by previous presidencies and in line with the approach that has been taken by the G7 worldwide. We conceived our G7 presidency as an opportunity to exchange dialogue with our partners. In our view, the G7 is not a fortress, not an exclusive club, but a group open to the requests and expectations to the rest of the world. Prime Minister Meloni also tried to signal this approach that she has in mind by enlarging the invitation in the so-called outreach sessions to a very large number of countries, not necessarily always aligned with each other, but simply to make it clear that the contribution of other countries is very much needed in order to approach this open view towards the global South. In this regard, I think that we need to do more and better to address three key issues in the continent. Issues such as political instability, insecurity, and migration. This is the reason why we plan to have, as I said before, a substantive presence by African leaders invited in the outreach sessions. We are promoting a more equitable partnership with the African continent and a comprehensive approach in line with the Mattei Plan, which Italy has engaged in promoting worldwide, not only in the dialogue with the African countries, but also with the dialogue of the financial institutions and possible other donors. So we should engage more with Africa, not only because it is again a battleground for democracies and autocracies, and we should prevent the latter from influencing African countries. Engage with Africa is above all a moral imperative, especially for Italy, given our proximity and our, let's say, reciprocal interests with the continent. Another key issue, which is very much high in our agenda, is artificial intelligence. On many occasions, Prime Minister Meloni stated very clearly that this technology must be developed at the service of humankind, enhance well-being, strengthen our democracies and nations, and bolster social cohesion. We intend to build on the excellent work done last year by the Japanese presidency, which promoted the adoption of the Hiroshima Process on international guiding principles and of a code of conduct for public and private organizations developing and using advanced artificial intelligence systems. On this basis, we aim at working on global governance mechanisms of AI to ensure this technology follows clear ethical guardrails and is inspired by what we call algo-ethics. We intend to promote this approach in almost all the work streams of our G7 presidency, as we believe that artificial intelligence is a disruptive technology, and we must be vigilant about the associated risk and impacts on our economies and societies. During their meetings held in Trento and in Verona last March, G7 industry and digital ministers discussed the use of AI in the public sector and consulted with the business sector on how AI can have a positive impact to increase productivity, efficiency, innovation, and scientific research. We are also working on an action plan to identify policy and regulatory frameworks for AI in the labor markets and prevent millions of workers from losing their jobs. We plan to propose this action plan during the G7 summit and then to develop it at the Labour Ministerial meeting, which is supposed to take place in Cagliari in the month of September. I understand that we will have 2 additional rounds of exchanges, so I will just go very quickly through a number of other issues which are also in the list of the priorities that we will discuss at the summit. Of course, high in the agenda are a number of global issues such as health, climate change, and energy. We will come back to it, as I said before. Of course, other issues will be the humanitarian assistance needed above all in crisis area, peace, security, and nuclear disarmament, and migration and food security. On migration, as you know, and it comes to no surprise to you all, that migration is very high in the Italian agenda. It is an issue not always easy to deal with also at G7 level. What I can tell you from now is that our approach here again will be an integrated one, taking into consideration that this global phenomenon has to be managed at a global level, and that has to take into account not only the impact that migration has on G7 countries, but also on countries of transit and origin. There are displaced people within developing countries, as you know. There are flows of migrations that are impacting also on economies in African countries or in other countries in the world. So in this sector, more than others, the integrated approach is very much needed. And what we have in mind is to tackle the issue of migration from 3 points of view. The first one, of course, is tackling the root causes of migration, promoting sustainable development, as I said, in countries of origin and transit. The second one is promoting a more coherent and effective cooperation among like-minded countries, which does not necessarily mean only the G7 one, but also very much the countries of origin and transit in fighting against smugglers, traffickers. Of course, one key element would be the follow the money approach that would allow also preventing the instrumentalization of migration by criminality in general. And the third sector that we will certainly consider is the positive impact that migration can have on also industrialized countries' economy, therefore envisaging the possibility on the basis of decisions that each state may take to provide the possibility to have legal channels of migration. This is still under discussion. We will, of course, come back to it. But again, it is among the priorities that we are proposing. I will stop at that. And of course, I am ready to answer to your questions and to continue the debate as long as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Someone asked me, Sherpa, why Sherpa? What does Sherpa mean? You know, Sherpa is the name of an ethnic group from Nepal, from Himalaya, from the mountains, that is skilled to live in a very difficult environment with lack of oxygen, etc. And so alpinists coming from Europe used the Sherpa people to help them to carry sacks for organizing camps, to climb the highest mountain in Himalaya. And so in the diplomatic slang, we say Sherpa to mean the high-level diplomat who prepares all the work for the head of state and government to reach the final agreement. So who is really leading and building the process in this year for the G7 is Ambassador Elisabetta Belloni. And as well, we use the same name for Civil 7 and for Civil 20. And for instance, we have here in the hall Aoi, who was the Sherpa for the Civil 7 last year in Japan, and Masaki, who was the Civil 20 Sherpa 3 or 4 years ago. And Alessandra from Brazil should be here. Yeah, welcome, Alessandra. She is the current Civil 20 Sherpa from Brazil. And Valeria, who is our Civil 7 Sherpa, who prepares all the work and with all the working groups. I will leave the floor to you to help all the coordinators to raise the very synthetic. We have not a lot of time, unfortunately, but we thank again the ambassador to be with us this morning to deepen the thematic question. And I leave you the preparation with all the coordinators. Thank you, Valeria.
Thanks a lot, Riccardo, and thank you once again, Ambassador Belloni, for giving us this comprehensive overview of the priorities of the G7 Italian presidency this year. We are doing now the same, diving a bit deeper into the specific priorities and recommendations the civil society is bringing to the table and channeling to the G7 countries. And I would start with three thematic working group and three thematic issues. The Economic Justice and Transformation Working Group, with the coordinator also of Climate, Energy and Transformation and Environmental Justice, and the coordinator of Global Health Working Group. All of the three will underline the fact that the evolving polycrisis exacerbated the economic systemic failures, undermining the prospect for a just just equitable and rights-based recovery. And we call then for a real transformation of the current economic, trade, and financial architecture, together with the climate, financial architecture, and the health one. So starting from Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Valeria. Thank you so much to Ambassador Belloni, and thank you for the colleagues of L7 that support us in this reflection about the changes needed in economic, in trade and investment systems. There is no room left for business as usual responses, in our opinion, and our recommendation are organized around 8 thematic priorities. The first is on debt relief and resolution, and we call G7 to promote and support multilateral negotiation to move towards the establishment of a debt resolution mechanism under UN guidance. Those are the main requests, and then you in the document you'll find all the others requests. About the second issues in the concessional and development finance, we support an immediate new special drawing rights allocation, or almost better accountability of the allocation, the current allocation, and a multilateral development bank reforms, including its governance, that is needed to address the increasing financing gap. We need to scale up additional and grant-based public climate finance, and we need to secure that a gender-sensitive approach is applied to finance and trade policies. About investment, we saw in the recent years the investment gaps reach the amazing, the incredible amount of $4 trillion needed to address the current situation, and we call G7 to scale up all investment, but all investments, including the Mattei Plan ones, must have a broader and in-depth assessment of the economic, financial, social, and environmental impacts that are needed in order not to alleviate the current situation. About taxation, we support the creation and implementation of the UN Tax Convention towards the establishment of the Universal International and Intergovernmental Tax Convention. And about trade, we welcome this new approach on friendshoring and reshoring that ensure the most effective working of the global supply chain, but we need to lead global trade policies to a binding assessment of their impact on human, social, and environmental rights. And finally, about business and human rights, we must introduce bindings, human rights, and environmental due diligence legislations for the corporate, financial, and public sector. We ask for the potential of the proximity economy to be recognized. These experiences of the civil economy, the social and solidarity economy, the fair trade, the circular economy are not just good practices, but you know it very well, and you know them very well for your past and your work together with our organization. And because they support the national economic and productive system with a constant multinational growth, we need changes, and we need them now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. And now I would like to turn on Robin Montgomery for Global Health Working Group.
Thanks so much, Valeria. First, may I also echo everyone here today and express our great appreciation to you, Ambassador, for joining us and being so engaged in these very critical dialogues over the next couple of days. And welcome to everyone in the room and online. So together with my close colleague, Stefania Burbo, who is here with me today, we had the great pleasure and privilege to coordinate the Global Health Working Group, which met extensively, intensively, beginning in early January 2024. So together, as a Global Health Working Group, we represent the voices, the expertise, the valuable insights, the lived experiences of affected communities and civil society who work on issues of global health from around the world. So suffice it to say We know that at least 4.5 billion people today lack coverage for essential health services. This means that it is about 3 times the population of India or of China who remain without access to health. Our global community is simultaneously confronted by an 18 million person shortage in our global health workforce, and the direct health costs of climate change promise to surpass $2 to $4 billion a year globally. These deep deficits undercut our collective ability to achieve everything that we have worked so hard to do in terms of universal health coverage, the STD agenda, and the devastating consequences of failure, of course, disproportionately affect our brothers and our sisters in low and middle income countries. Our recommendations for the G7 underscore the protection and the advancement of health equity, gender equality, human rights, global solidarity by rebalancing geopolitical inequities and decolonizing health so that we're able to guarantee every single person the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health without financial hardship. Our recommendations are cemented in the understanding that the most marginalized, criminalized, and vulnerable populations and communities must be at the center of all global health strategies, policies, programmings, and practice. We have an extensive and very robust evidence base that shows that when affected communities are at the center of policies, at the center of programming, and at the center of practice, as agents of change, as equal partners, as innovators, then that's when we see transformative change that brings better system outcomes, greater efficiencies, greater social accountability, and ultimately more prepared, just, and resilient societies. So just briefly, our recommendations covered 4 broad areas: health equity, global health architecture, universal health coverage, climate and health. Under health equity, we call on the global health, the G7 leaders to remove all forms of stigma, discrimination, and criminalization from health policy frameworks at all levels. We also call on G7 leaders to collect disaggregated intersectional data as evidence that is critical to informing decision-making and the transparent tracking of progress achieved towards UHC. With regards to the global health architecture, we urge G7 leaders to enable and accelerate the implementation of mechanisms to meaningfully and inclusively include the full participation of civil society and local communities at all levels, phases of global health governance. So this is by no means the fulsome account of all of our recommendations, but we are here to support the Italian presidency in taking the recommendations forward into the G7 summit, and we look forward to discussing these further with you in the weeks and the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. From these 2 first participants and coordinators, it's clear that we had a vibrant discussion expressing the different angles and perspectives from the civil society. Indices cover different issues in the C7. We are 700 organizations from 70 countries. And now I would like to turn on the floor to Maria Grazia Midulla for climate, energy transformation and environmental justice. As the G7 holds a disproportionate responsibility for the climate crisis and biodiversity loss, while having disproportionate resources and capacity to respond, we clearly set some recommendations also on that. Maria Grazia, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Yes. The impact of climate change is visible everywhere. We have been data that are really scaring. The biodiversity loss is also undermining the support for life. We need to accelerate the transition. We need to act. I would like to underline that climate change is not impacting only lives and things. Climate change is already impacting economy. Is impacting economy everywhere, and starting from the food chain. Climate change is also fueling all crises. So we need cooperation among the countries for a common challenge, crucial for the planet and the civilization as we know them, the planet and human civilization. That's why we would like to underline that an encouraging result was made by the G7, the ministerial G7 on climate, energy, and environment. The phase out deadline, the deadline for the phase out of coal, but that's not enough. We need a plan, a concrete plan to phase out all fossil fuels. In Dubai, it was stated, transitioning away from fossil fuels, but we need deadlines, steps, and concrete plans. We also need the triple renewable energy. I'm still citing the Dubai outcomes, and double energy efficiency. That's also crucial for creating the basis of the transition. We need very good NDCs, not only good in terms of targets, of pledges, but also very good on the real transformational aim, the real transformational ability. As already Monica said, we need scaling up new and additional finance for climate and nature. So we need to recognize the need to unlock climate finance in the trillions range. It was already in the final communique of the ministerial, and committing for a new collective quantified goal on climate finance going beyond the 100 billion target. We also need to have money for biodiversity. We think that biodiversity is something not crucial, but it is crucial. It is, as I already said, the basis for life. So we need at least 20 billion per year by 2025, and 30 billion per year by 2030. That's our asks. I managed to keep it very, very focused. But I must admit that just a couple of years ago, it was not so a common goal, limiting global warming to 1.5. Now everybody is realizing that that's crucial. That's crucial for Italy. Italy is in the Mediterranean, that is a climate change hotspot. It's crucial for everyone because climate change is affecting everybody. nobody is safe. And but we need 1.5 in reality, not only on papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Grazia. It's a matter of urgency, so I will turn on the floor to the Ambassador Belloni for a reaction on these three main policy issues.
Well, thank you. You have outlined your recommendations, which of course had already been studied by my team. And of course, the recommendations that you just presented very much relate to global issues. And in this respect, again, I would like to reiterate that our aim is to try to strengthen in replying to those challenges relating to global issues in a way that we would be able to strengthen the role of the G7 as the steering committee of liberal democracies and market economies. We very much think that at this juncture, the G7 can play a pivotal role in ensuring that the international order will continue to be based on agreed rules and not on the right of the strongest. We are very much aware of the fact that this is not an easy endeavor, but we still hope that we can achieve it. And of course, in order to achieve it, we very much rely on your contribution. I think we can build upon what you yourself are proposing in order to build also consensus on this kind of approach. Coming to the specific issues that you have raised, of course, your recommendation on debt relief, climate finance, the reform of the multilateral development banks are very much taken into consideration. I would like to recall that only a few weeks ago, on the margins of the spring meetings in Washington, the G7 ministers of finance and the governors of the central banks adopted a statement reiterating the commitment to strengthen multilateral development banks to address the most pressing development and global challenges. On debt, it is important certainly to step up efforts to address the situation in some low and middle income countries. We are working in coordination with the G20 and with the Brazilian presidency to implement the so-called common framework for debt treatments in a predictable and timely manner, providing more clarity to debtors and creditors and building on lessons learned. As you yourself suggested in your document, we are also considering introducing a discussion on global minimum tax. You know, there is some work which is ongoing in Paris at OECD level, which we are following very closely, depending also upon the outcome of the meeting, which is scheduled, I think, by the end of May. Then we will be able to adapt the recommendation or the commitment that the G7 would be ready to adopt at the summit. On climate and energy, our approach aims at reducing greenhouse gas emissions to keep the limit of 1.5 degree average temperature rise within reach, while tripling global renewable energy capacity and strengthen energy security. As you know, the meeting of the minister already took place, so you could, I'm sure you have read the declaration which was issued at the end of the meeting, and the commitment that are already stated there, and of which we are pretty sure that the leaders will take stock in Apulia. We are also working on an initiative to reduce insurance cost for farmers in case of natural catastrophes, such as floodings and droughts, which unfortunately, due to climate changes, are going to be more frequent in the future. This will very much depend also on technical discussions that are ongoing. As you can imagine, is quite a tricky issue when you talk about insurances and the ways that insurance should be financed. We won't be able to address such global challenges without, as I said before, involving in a very constructive way the so-called Global South. This is why, as I said before, we have already extended the invitation to the extent possible to a large number of countries which we think could contribute to the deliberations of the summit. And of course, in choosing those countries, we are very much focused on Africa. Again, as I said before, we need to strengthen the G7 role as the partner of choice for developing countries in key areas such as infrastructure, energy, and digitalization. We have to do so in trying really to demonstrate that G7 countries do represent the best offer for partners. In terms, of course, of concrete initiatives. In this respect, we are certainly ready to strengthen the partnership for global infrastructures and investments, the so-called PGI initiative to promote job creation. Of course, together with the PGI, we will try to align it with the Mattei Plan as well as with the European Union Global Gateway. This is for what I understand have been the recommendations so far.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ambassador Belloni. Yes, you tackled all of the issues we raised, and we are very much looking forward to continuing also this discussion. Also, we already addressed our recommendations to ministers on climate and energy during the ministerial meeting. Of course, we are preparing our action and our political dialogue in view of the two ministerial meetings on global health and finance as well. But now I would like to just ask my other colleagues, coordinator of the other four working groups of the Civil 7, to channel and deliver the main recommendations. Unfortunately, we are running short of time, so please take your intervention shortened. But it's a pleasure for us to introduce to the different working groups and issues, because they are critical in our work this year as Civil 7 with the Italian presidency. First of all, the humanitarian principle working group with Miro Modrusan will address the needs of taking into account and respect the international humanitarian law and the humanitarian principles. Then we will dive into the peace, common security and nuclear disarmament working group, where peace is quite key for us, as we mentioned today during the current situation. And then we will tackle and introduce you to the different recommendations from food systems transformation and food justice working group, which is a new working group of the Civil 7. and human mobility and migration as well, exactly to reflect the urgency of tackling the different root causes of poverty, injustice, and inequalities. So I leave the floor beforehand to Miro, and then Francesco. Please, Miro Modrosan.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Belloni, allow me to first acknowledge Jeremy Wellard from ICFA as the other co-chair of our working group. I also want to highlight with gratitude that the humanitarian recommendations provided in the C7 Communique are a result of collective efforts of almost 130 working group members from around the world. It is astounding that 75 years after the Geneva Conventions, we continue to see millions of civilians being forcibly displaced and killed in many thousands. Many are subjected to sexual and gender-based violence and starvation as a weapon of war, and denied access to health, water, sanitation, and shelter. It is shocking that in the 21st century, we need to remember that all human life has universal value, regardless of nationality, ethnic background, gender, religion, or other identity, and that all human lives are equal wherever they may live. As we know, international humanitarian law and humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence are at the very heart of Geneva Conventions. Yet we see double standards and unequal application and respect of IHL and other laws in different crises by states, including G7 members, with geopolitical interests placed before people's lives and dignity. Look at the continued atrocities in Tigray, or how little attention is being given to the plight of the Sudanese population. How can we live with the silent complicity of the international community with tragedy unfolding for hundreds of thousands of civilians in Gaza, while at the same time being clear and vocal about the IHL violations in Ukraine? These are just some examples that are sounding the alarm bells that if we truly respect humanity, we have to respect all of humanity everywhere and avoid descending into further chaos we are facing. So we appeal to the moral obligation of G7 to respect and uphold the IHL commitments in an equitable way and promote systemic and transformative changes in international policies. We are calling for the compliance with all UN Security Council resolutions on the protection of civilians, humanitarian personnel, and children in armed conflict, as well as resolutions on women, peace and security, sexual violence in armed conflict, protection of education in armed conflict, and protection of persons with disabilities in conflict. We urge the G7 to issue joint public statement and implement policy to place humanity and the right to life with dignity firmly back at the center of the multilateral humanitarian agenda, and to affirm the humanitarian imperative that action must be taken to prevent or alleviate human suffering. Our work also includes further 13 recommendations to G7, including calling for safeguarding the ability of humanitarian organizations to operate independently and impartially, to take further steps to be accountable and inclusive of those most at risk, to increase financial resources to enable addressing the needs of the most vulnerable, and to strengthen the collaboration with development actors to address long-term issues and gradually reduce humanitarian needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Miro. And while we reaffirm diplomacy as the only solution for current wars, we call to bridge the gap between conflict resolution and long-term building strategies, addressing the persistent structural challenges at the basis of the conflicts. Francesco Vignarca, the floor is yours.
Dear friends and colleagues, benvenuti a Roma. I'd like to begin by thanking all the people that participated in this process, coordinated this process, and my fellow coordinators of this working group, Emily Molinari and Sean Conner from the International Peace Bureau. Of course, I'd like to thank also Ambassador Belloni and the willingness to engage in this dialogue. This is a working group with the double passing of the torch, the first with this working group, because of course you cannot have very impactful and meaningful humanitarian assistance without solving the problem of wars. So we are interlinked. And also there's a passing of the torch from the other year working group in the G7 held in Japan. There was a discussion about nuclear disarmament. This year we decided to, expand the approach and take into consideration also peace and common security. As was said in a previous meeting, it takes courage to try to propose these things that we are proposing to the G7 and to the international community in general, but we have this courage, and the civil society has this courage and must have this, because we want really to try to reach all the objectives and goals that we already set. And of course, the fragility of global peace demands the utmost urgency and concrete multilateral action. We are in an urgent situation. The G7, representing a specific bloc of a much larger international community, must recognize that they cannot achieve peace and security on their own, and they must strengthen the focus on global cooperation, resolving rivalries that prevent cooperation. We think that G7 and all the international community must be ready to find compromise and preserve dialogue despite strategic differences. So the recommendations are on common security, reaffirmed support for an international order based on international law and on global and regional peace architecture. Express active support for the UN Secretary General new agenda for peace. Focus resources and attention on addressing the root causes of violence and conflict and adapting a holistic system approach. Actively include women and youth in peace-building activities and address interlinked nature of war, militarism, climate change, environmental degradation. We must need better support involving financially civil society and grassroots peace builder and invest in peace education. On general disarmament, we know that we are outside the mainstream, but we ask to reduce military spending and arms reduction in favor of investment in diplomacy and human security. Act swiftly to expand international multilateral treaties on emerging military technologies, as was said, including artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and space weaponry. Strengthen policies on preventing arms transfer into conflict-prone and active conflict zones, in particular where international law has been violated and human rights are violated. Reaffirm support for a fourth special session on disarmament in the UNGA. It has been some time since the last special session, so we need a new one, particularly in this new framework. On nuclear disarmament, reaffirm the G7 position that the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons by any actor is unacceptable. And resume with urgency nuclear arms reduction processes that are really in a dire straits now. Reinvigorating strategic stability link talks between USA, Russia, and the dialogue with China. And finally, participate in good faith in the meeting of the states parties of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. And as migration has been a fundamental part of human development through history, there are more women, men, and children on the move nowadays than ever before. Francesco, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, let me take this opportunity being the co-spokesperson of GCAP, who actually took this effort to organize the Civil 7, to thank again FAO, to thank again the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Sherpa Office, and the SDG campaign, Marina Ponti and Samuele Cofano, and Silvia Francescon and the UBI for making this happen, but especially the Secretariat. It was an amazing effort, and the Chair, Riccardo Moro and Valeria, again, thanks for this, really. And also, again, the Sherpa, Ambassador Belloni, thank you so much, dear friend, and welcome back among the civil society organization. You are highly esteemed by many of us, you know that, so try to stay long. So don't count that on my 3 minutes, please. You already said something, Valeria. I think we all know that for socioeconomic and many other reasons, including wars, Nowadays, we have more women, children, and men on the move than ever before. And we would really like to invite the G7 in Apulia. It was really good to hear from the Sherpa before how important is migration for this G7. And we would really like to invite the G7 to have a new vision on migration, because we worked, and I thank also Rose Warden, who is there as a coordinator. We worked 80 people from all over the world to really try to come up with a paragraph of this document that you have here, which we really wanted to be constructive. So we really hope that these proposals are constructive for the G7, and that the G7 in Apulia will be able to take into account some of these proposals at least. And we believe that the world needs to address migration from a long-term perspective. This is really very, very important for us, approaching it as a stable part of state policies rather than a crisis. For this reason, in order to improve migration governance, we hope that in Apulia, the G7 vision will be one that could shift to a focus on human mobility from an emergency approach to an encompassing and long-term approach, turning migration flows into predictable, safe, regular, and manageable migration channels. This is really one of the most important issues that came out from 8 people interacting throughout this month. In the framework of the multilateral action and in true partnership with Global South and with diaspora, and we're glad that you mentioned, Ambassador Belloni, that you want to partner with the South and with other origin, transit, and destination countries. We have 7 recommendations. Ensure safe and regular migration channel in order to promote protection of human rights and sustainable development of origin, transit, and destination countries. Establishing cooperative migration governance. Yes, we actually support that. Please go ahead and strengthen that governance. Replacing migration policies, approaches that externalize borders with human rights-centered cooperation in support of migration and host communities' well-being, also host communities' well-being. But please replace that externalized approach with human rights-centered approach, or at least make an effort to bring together the global community into that. Invest in country of origin and transit on the basis of specific partnership agreement, but with the focus of involving partner countries in origin countries, involving civil society organization and the diaspora, avoiding the instrumentalization of ODA to reduce migration through measures that are detrimental of human rights, and that's very important for us. Support low-income countries. You spoke about the fact that most of displacement happens in low-income countries. This is very important. Please support low-income countries of destination to increase their capacity to host migrants. And then pursue fundamental objectives of development cooperation in addressing root causes. And keep in mind, please, that development leads to increased migration in the short and medium term, for which safe and regular channel must be provided. So with the Mattei plan, please, let's keep in mind that in the short and medium term, migration could increase. And then the last 2, ensure protection for persons at risk, including but not limited to women and children, and particular attention to people who experienced trafficking and other forms of modern slavery. And then value the positive aspects of migration. Please value the positive aspects of migration. That's the best way to combat and to fight racism and discrimination. Migration is and could be positive. And please make an effort to integrate and to include socially and also from a labor point of view. Thanks.
Thank you, Francesco. Sobering, but also words of leadership. Thanks a lot. Civil society is putting forward proposals and approaches based on human rights, as we mentioned many times. I would like to conclude with the last working group setting of recommendation on food justice, food which is not just a commodity, but a fundamental human right. Italo Rizzi, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Belloni, there is a general understanding that of the failure of food insecurity reduction and about the growing challenge posed by the adoption of the industrial agricultural model with the severe implication for human and environment health. But the food system is also affected by or afflicted by economic concentration and excess of speculation with the impoverishment of the already vulnerables. Even in the G7 countries, the food system has shown its fragility along value chains, with farmers protesting because neither the right price nor the farmer's role are fully recognized. We, the civil society, reaffirm that food is not just a commodity, and a deep transformation rooted in the human rights framework is required for just food systems. Our analysis has focused on three areas: food governance, agroecology transition, and food crisis, about challenges and priorities for the action. I skip all challenges except three: the dispersion of decision-making in food governance, making impossible to address the concentration of power in food supply chains, accelerated by robotics and unregulated AI. Underinvestment in agriculture and in the response in food crisis. And current subsidies, the current subsidy system and the technological fix hinder the transition to sustainable agriculture. So our policy recommendation to the G7 are to recognize and support the UN Committee on World Food Security, supported by the high-level panel of experts, in enduring independent analysis and democratic participation in the decision-making process, to uphold already existing international frameworks, such as UNDROP and others, redirect trade agreement and market regulation by promoting transparency in agricultural market, enhancing food security strategic reserve, improving market regulation both in financial and real market to ensure farmers receive a fair price and all consumers get access to food. Invest in farmer aggregation, territorial food systems, in local food production and public procurement, with a ban for investment impeding farmer access to land, water, and seeds. And also to ensure policy coherence for development, supporting the binding treaty on business and human rights, and taking the lead in cancelling debts, especially for Africa. And sustain the agroecology transition, which is largely proved to be beneficial also from the socio-economic perspective, by co-planning investment in pathways of food system transformation. Support to gender justice with inclusive and transformative policies, land rights and financial services, among others, and by direct support. Invest in prevention and answer to food crisis by the adoption of the IPC analytic tool and anticipatory financing accessible to local actors, with ambitious and trackable commitment to the 2025 Nutrition for Growth and IDA 21 replenishment, by the support to the multisectoral and nexus approach to transform the system and reduce malnutrition, and finally, by preventing the use of hunger as a weapon of war. Thank you.
Thank you, Italo. And now the floor is yours, Ambassador, for a quick reaction on all of the issues.
Thank you. I will try to just touch each of the issues that you have, actually recommendations that you have proposed in this second round. Of course, we are all aware that we are living in very difficult and challenges moment. Peace and security have never been at risk as in these months. So we see that war is already impacting, actually taking place in Europe, in the Middle East. There are conflict areas in Africa and beyond. So as a G7 presidency, we are trying to coordinate political initiatives and actions to facilitate de-escalation of the crisis, and we are also trying to avoid tensions from spreading further. In this respect, of course, we are taking bilateral initiatives. The Italian contribution to peace efforts are known, but of course, as G7 presidency, we are trying to galvanize efforts in order to avoid all sorts of escalation, and if it is at all possible, to try to promote negotiations to avoid or to solve the present crisis. As you all know, last year, the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida decided to host the G7 summit in Hiroshima to reaffirm the commitment to achieving a world without nuclear weapons with undiminished security for all. That was the kind of promoted saying. As presidency, we support the Hiroshima vision, and we remain firmly committed to preventing proliferation and use of all weapons of mass destruction. Russia's nuclear rhetoric is, of course, an element of great concern for all of us. And in this respect, I would also mention the North Korean as well as Iranian continued advancement of nuclear programs, which again are a reason of great concern for us. I think we have to continue to work to address these threats, above all in the G7 framework, to uphold the global nuclear non-proliferation regime and the foundation for the pursuit of nuclear disarmament and peaceful uses of nuclear energy. On food security, as I stated before, of course, food security is very much at the core of our program. We agree with your recommendations. Boosting agriculture production is, of course, essential to achieve this challenge, while the global population growth grows to 10 billion by 2050. At least this is the forecast. So it is quite clear to all of us that this is one of the main issues that we have to address. And of course, we are also very much aware, and we want to tackle this aspect, that food security requires efficient agricultural systems that increase production, improve the sustainability of natural resources, and increase their resiliency, adapting to rapid changes and extreme conditions. For these very reasons, at the G7 summit, we are going to propose, and we are negotiating it at present, we are proposing the launching of the so-called Apulia Food Security Initiative, which is meant specifically to focus on Africa and which intends to catalyze international public as well as private financing for food security, for nutrition and sustainable food systems. On migration, I have already mentioned to you the approach that we have in mind. We share many of the views that you presented in your document. In particularly, we agree that we should manage the phenomena, the issue of migration, with a long-term integrated approach. Of course, migration cannot be considered and tackled as an emergency, as quite often it happened. In this perspective, promoting development, in our view, is the first, I would say, the basis for whatever initiative we want to promote. Poverty and the lack of job opportunities are really the main reasons, the main root causes of migration. And in this respect, we want really to make it clear that migration should not be a necessity. We should work to ensure that every individual has the right to live and to thrive in his or her home country. In this context, we will promote a series of concrete actions, if at all possible, to agree it at G7 level. These actions are aimed at promoting sustainable development, both of countries of origin and of transit, of migratory flows. In particular, we have in mind Africa, but of course the approach can be extended worldwide. These projects are to be developed in synergy with existing instruments, such as the ones I mentioned before, the Global Gateway, the PGII, the Piano Mattei. We conceived these initiative by opening a constructive dialogue and listening to the needs of the nations involved, and mobilizing energy and resources in favor of their economy. The strategy aims at creating the conditions so that every human being can live with dignity in their own nation. Another key pillar of our strategy is, as I said before, enhancing cooperation in order to target illegal trafficking, in order to target human trafficker, both on the ground as well as in their financial interest. As I said before, we have in mind the slogan, follow the money, which of course will bring us to target traffickers. As you know, according to UN data, almost $10 billion a year are directed towards traffickers. The third pillar concerns legal migration. As I said before, nobody denies that migration is also an opportunity, above all if you consider the demographic data in certain countries. But the concept that we would like to see affirmed is that there is only one way to migrate, which is the legal migration. And in this respect, I think my country, Italy, is an example, because recently the government basically tripled the number of legal visas that can be made available for legal migration. This, of course, is based on a sovereign decision by the state, and it has to be according to international laws and standards. I'm not referring, of course, to refugees or to asylum seekers, which is another chapter that cannot be mixed up with illegal migration issues. But again, the important issue is that these legal channels have to be, in order to be legal, in accordance and in compliance with the national legislations and national decisions, which will also depend upon the cooperation that countries of origin and transit show in tackling traffickers and the illegal flows of migration. In other words, open channels, but at the same time, cooperation is needed not only among industrialized countries, but also with countries of origin and transit in order to fight the abuses against those migrants that are, of course, carried out by traffickers and by criminality. This is it. I think I've tried to come back to each of the issues that you have raised, and wish me good luck for the summit.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. You gave us a level of nuances and inputs which are truly indispensable. You gave us also some hopes, but we see also some other challenges. So our hope is exactly to continue this discussion and conversation together. Once again, thanks a lot for making the time. We are definitely over time. And I would like just to conclude with one sentence we put clearly in our preamble, which is that the G7 can be part of the problem if it unilaterally promotes the interests of the most developed economies, or part of the solution if it champions human rights and the common interest of humanity and the planet for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, and secure future. And we hope it will be a reality. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. This session is ending. Just a couple of, I would like to say two things. The first one, you've heard the Ambassador Bologna mentioning twice artificial intelligence. And we don't have a specific space to that in our communique, and there is a reason for that. We dealt with it in our dialogue with the working group on employment, particularly in the G7 process, but we are working on this issue, particularly at the C7, at the C20 level. It is a very relevant issue. All the process of digitalization, it is in our interest, and we are speaking about that in that space. But let me thank you again, Ambassador, for your presence here, also because one of the main concerns that international civil society has now is the shrinking of safe spaces. We are facing a growing difficulty in speaking with the governments, with the institution. It is something that you see in the political discourse. Even in Italy, we have a risk that political discourse can make increasing a culture of racism, of antagonism, of arrogances. That is different from what you share with us today, and we appreciate a lot what you shared with us, with you. So please raise with also the government of the G7 that this is a strong concern, and we can face all the challenges we have only if we do it together and not limiting the space of participation and of civic dialogue. This is a strong concern out of democracies, but it is something that is poisoning also the life of our democracies and also of the 7 countries. So please share with us a photo opportunity to deliver to you the communique. Please, Daron, can you come here? Yeah. And now we have some minutes. Valeria and Daron will help us. Daron is from the Canadian platform, will help us in understanding the process of these 2 days for this C7 deep dive. Thank you, Valeria. Thank you, Daron. I leave the floor to you. Yeah. Just give me my homework. Yeah. Sorry.
So thank you again for your attention. A lot of inputs, we know, but this is just the starting point for us to discuss and dive into the different issues of the Civil 7 Communique, and we designed indeed the Civil 7 Summit and the different parallel and plenary session exactly for this purpose. So we will have a chance to build on the conversation, to continue our reflection and strategize also our advocacy action. Daron, there is something that maybe we would like to hear from the audience, so the floor is yours.
Sure. So I know we are almost at lunchtime. I just ask for a little bit more patience and we'll all be able to go eat very shortly. So we'll be able to kind of discuss a little bit more about what we are going to do for the next, I guess, day and a half until tomorrow. If we can just put up the Menti, yeah. So this session, we just had a great opening session, and this session is, we're gonna ask from a little bit of input from everybody here in the room and also everybody online. So we're gonna be using something called a Menti. And on the next slide, you can kind of see how to use it. So we're going to be asking a few questions, and hopefully you'll be able to give us some great insights into how you think about some of the questions that we are going to tackle for the next couple of days. So very simple. You can either scan your QR code that you see on the screen or go to menti.com and enter the number here. So we'll give you a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to kind of log in. Okay, so the first question that we're going to tackle, which is question number 4 for our AV specialists. So we saw a lot of intersections or a lot of intersectional thematics this morning during the communique, and we're going to see a lot of that in the next couple of days. And so we want to ask you, what are some thematic intersections that you would like to see prioritized during the 2025 C7 process? So not just the summit, during the whole process. This is of particular interest to Cooperation Canada as chair of the 2025 process. So we will take all of these into account, all of these inputs from you, and hopefully use them next year. So I see, go ahead. I see a lot of very interesting ones here. Gender equality, children, and women's rights, yes. Humanitarian and climate change, sure. Economic transformation with labor. So themes that together kind of intersect and interact with each other. We really want to see that. Development finance, that is something, of course, that's very important to our mandate in our organization and also very important to the future. Peace and justice, yes. So not only, immediate short-term peace, but also peace building and how that brings justice. Triple nexus, yes. That is also something that I think we heard, if I'm not mistaken, earlier today, and that is something that we hope to put a lot more emphasis on. Here, SRHR and gender equality, which is something also that we'll see later today in the parallel sessions. Great, a lot of very good things coming up. Decolonization. Human rights in war situations, very interesting. Good, I think we can, you can keep inputting if you like. Let's move on to the next question that Valeria will tackle.
Yes. Once again, thanks a lot for all of these inputs. They are also confirming that we are going in the right direction, but we need also to strengthen our advocacy action. And it is exactly for this purpose our next question to you. What are ways in which Civil 7 advocacy can be amplified? We mentioned the fact that the civil society space is shrinking. We need to strengthen our voice and make our messages effective. So we would like to gather from you some inputs and reflection on what are ways in which Civil 7 advocacy can be amplified. Wow, I see this word cloud. Media engagement sounds interesting. Youth participation. It's another word which is coming up clearly. Just to also mention the fact that there are several engagement groups in the Civil 7, in the G7, process. Youth is one of them, Youth 7, together with women, Think Tank 7, Business 7, L7, and so on. But it's interesting because Civil 7, of course, has a wide representation. And social media, universities, I cannot see very well from here, the word cloud. If you can help me in the direction, because I cannot see very well. This is the fact that there are a lot of inputs, and this word cloud reflects exactly the vibrant conversation and vibrant inputs from different parts of the world with different perspectives. So, as we collected your inputs, I think it would be great just to explain how the Civil 7 Summit will go ahead. And we have parallel sessions now after lunch break. And Darren, can you tell us something about today's parallel session?
Right, so if we can put the parallel sessions up on the screen, we have parallel sessions today and tomorrow as well, right? So in today's parallel sessions, which is just after lunch, we have one called Civil Society's Vital Role in Conflict Resolution in Israel-Palestine, pre, post, and during the current crisis. So in this session, we're going to hear directly from Palestinian and Israeli civil society activists and hopefully have a really interesting Q&A discussion with them. So where a lot of the discussion right now is on ceasefire and global solidarity actions, we hope and we also expect to hear discussions about long-term peace and involvement in local civil society in the process. In the Iran room, number 2 here, is human mobility and climate change, recognizing linkages and maximizing collective advocacy to improve responses. So this is going to draw from the experiences of a lot of actors working in communities affected by climate change and the associated migration pressures, and really shine a light on the impacts of climate change and migration policies. So the third one here in the Ethiopia room is coordinated action against the global food crisis. So how the G7 and the G20 can save lives, build resilience, and secure the future. So the objectives for this session are four-pronged. So you're going to have bring to light the global food crisis and through voices from affected communities. The other one is to elevate the policy recommendations from the C7 that we heard earlier, champion the idea of a global plan at the G7 and the G20, and explore how diverse stakeholders can work together effectively to tackle this global food crisis. And last but not least, in the Austria room, is a session, basically a panel discussion on bodily autonomy as an essential element for gender equality through specific thematic areas. So SRHR, GBV, empowerment of women and girls, and achieving the SDGs. And this session is called The Right to Bodily Autonomy, a Right for Achieving Gender Equality. Now for the Wednesday sessions, go ahead, Valeria.
Thanks a lot, Darren, and don't worry, we have FAO messengers who will navigate through the different meeting rooms here at the FAO premises. Regarding tomorrow, we will dive into the climate issues, especially by looking at this bridge between COP16 on biodiversity and COP19 taking place in Azerbaijan by the end of the year. And we will reflect together on how the G7 can foster a successful outcome of multilateral negotiations at COP16 and COP29. And it's exactly what we mentioned many times already today and along our journey, which is the clear sense that the G7 countries need to build consensus and strengthen the multilateral process. So this is a clear example. The climate parallel session will take place here in this red room. Then in the Lebanon room, we will talk about nuclear disarmament, which is part of our discussion together with peace building and common security. That would be this focus on nuclear disarmament, and especially on how we can raise our awareness and improve education on nuclear disarmament, so exactly what nuclear disarmament looks like. And on the Iran room, we will have humanitarian principles at a crossroad. You have heard already the international humanitarian law and the humanitarian principles are under attack. So with different perspectives, also local and global perspective, we will exactly reflect on now and which kind of action we need to undertake to make sure that the humanitarian assistance will be rooted in the humanitarian principles. And last but not least, on the Austria room, we will have a focus on health through equity and equity through health, exactly to reflect on global health. I've heard that there is a quite disappointing in the audience because the Italian Sherpa didn't tackle really in details the global health issues from the G7 perspective. So, of course, as we will have also officials in the lineup of this session, we think that it could be an occasion once again to build on the conversation, and for sure we will continue our advocacy action also, as I mentioned beforehand, in view of the upcoming ministerial meeting on health. And I will stop there because we finished with the parallel session, but we will have some plenary session as well. And I would like now to invite for just quick inputs. The three moderators of this free plenary session. I would like to invite Alessandra Nilo for the plenary session on interconnection and policy coherence for development. Alessandra Nilo, also C20 Sherpa, please take the floor, and Sean Conner for the plenary session on fostering peace building, and Patricia Miranda, who I think is here. Yes, Patricia, welcome for the plenary session on the reform of the international tax and financial architecture. And we will sit down together with you. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Alessandra, from Brazil, with, the important conversation about and around G20 issues and Civil 20. So you have, we are sharing the same, the same destiny and challenge in coordinating civil society for the two processes. I would like once again to emphasize the fact that we are jointly working together, Civil 7 and C20, exactly because we are, there are a lot of overlappings, but also because we really believe that it's relevant to work together and to continue to collaborate in order to be more effective. But Alessandra, the floor is yours for more details about the plenary sessions, but also a few words regarding the C20 process. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for inviting us from the C20 to be part of this C7 meeting, very important meeting. We are here with Henrique, also from Abongi. He is the president for C20. And well, the idea is to have this session this afternoon to discuss about policy coherence. Policy coherence is one of the challenges. Actually, the lack of policy coherence is one of the challenges that we have facing not only C7, but also in C20 processes. This is for us the most important thing, because at this moment, what we are seeing is the creation and strengthening of the other outside the multilateral systems process that are sometimes undermining the commitments that were already made on multilateral systems environment. So this is part of our concern at this moment. So we want to see, of course, G7 strong outcomes, and we want to see, of course, G20 strong outcomes, but these outcomes cannot be on the opposition of what was already achieved. Also, it is important to have more policy coherence between the international and domestic levels, because some governments are defending at the international arena decisions that are not being able to implement at the domestic level, or vice versa. So we need to address that particular situation. But besides that, I think for the session this afternoon, that is very important that you all participate and engage. We can also bring the sense of urgency to this conversation. So this is not a normal G7. This is not a normal G20. So we need really try to see and to accelerate the progress. So we have a very interesting session that there will be a possibility of participation, also hybrid participation. We will have different invitees to be with us. We'll have Marina from S2G campaign. We'll have a person from OC We have also representative from FAO. So I think that conversation will be very interested to lead us to see how these other stakeholder components could be included in this conversation of put forward a more coherent approach when defining and implementing policies around all those issues that are the priorities for G7. So I'm very much looking forward to have you all during this session engaged, participating and sharing not only the challenges, but the solutions that we definitely have to put forward there. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Alessandra. We are very much looking forward to it as well. And Darren?
Next, I'd really like to hear from Patricia Miranda, who is the coordinator for the Economic Justice and Transformation Working Group. We heard earlier from Monica DiSisto, who that was very interesting, and now the other coordinator. Please tell us about your plenary session.
Thanks, Darren. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Well, from what we have been working in this group is that we are in an evolving polycrisis that exacerbated economic systemic failures. The current global policies are not being fit for purpose. And we have seen mainly this with short-term policies that have been implemented so far. We are in a context of high debt levels, limited fiscal space, and trillionaire financing needs to reach sustainable development goals and the climate agenda. The G7 has an opportunity to set the path towards a global debt and financial architecture that allows a long-term fiscal sustainability that is centered on people and that is centered on the planet. We are reaching a point of no return at a time of depletion of the current economic model that is threatening the survival of the humanity and the planet. So there is no room left for business as usual responses. And the G20 was born as a result of an economic crisis that the world was facing. So economic policies are an important part of the core of the G7. So this session will address two key angles of the international financial architecture puzzle that are currently on the top of many agendas in global arenas, which is debt and international taxation. So we will address, is the common framework enough? What the world needs in terms of debt architecture? In terms of taxation, there are different processes going on. For instance, the process at the United Nations. And we will see what do we need to make tax policies a real way to reduce inequalities. To talk about this tomorrow morning in our plenary session, we will have key recommendations in terms of what the panelists would, what key policy would the panelists would select to advise as a recommendation to the G7. We will have representatives from civil society organizations. My colleague of the Civil 20 will be also part of this panel. We will have experts on debt and tax. And we will also have the participation in this panel of international financial institutions as the World Bank and the IMF, but also we will have the Italian Development Bank, and we will have the ministry, a representative from the Ministry of Economy and Finance to talk about synergies, challenges, and opportunities around these issues from the G7. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And it's also a great pleasure because Patricia is coordinating both the C20 and C7 Economic Justice and Transformation Working Group. I mean, the finance track of the C7 and C20. So it's a great opportunity, exactly reflecting this straight interconnection between the two engagements group and the two processes. And last but not least, I would like to turn on the floor to Sean Conner for the last plenary session. Will take place tomorrow on fostering peace building. When we designed this summit, we clearly knew that it wouldn't be without a session and a focus specific on peace. So Sean, tell us something about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. And we're very excited to have this final plenary session on fostering peace building. Beyond that, as our working group, one of the themes was common security. Common security may not be a familiar term to everyone. It's also known by several other names, whether it be collective security, as used by the UN Secretary General in his new Agenda for Peace last year. Other forms of the term have come around and gone in different ways, but the central idea is that we as a planet need to make ourselves safe, not any one country. You cannot make yourself safe at the expense of someone else. We need to create that security together. That necessarily means that we need global cooperation to achieve these aims. And I was quite disappointed by Ambassador Belloni's remarks that we work with like-minded allies, and that this is, to some degree, a discussion or debate between democracy and authoritarianism. This, to me, brings back this Cold War rhetoric of an us versus them, and it divides us when we need so desperately to work together to find solutions, not just to peace, but of all the issues that we're here to talk about today. And so this is something that we hope to push forward in this final session, is this idea that we need that global cooperation. We need necessary changes to global governance that are more equitable, that treat all nations equally. And this also means, of course, that the G7, which are historically the most powerful countries, the biggest spenders on the military, for example, I don't have the exact figure in front of me right now, but somewhere around 1.2 trillion US dollars, or half of all global military spending in 2023, was from the G7, 7 countries out of the entire world. And we had a lot of talk in previous panels about how much money is needed for financing all of this work that needs to be done to create an equitable global system. Where can this money come from? Only in a system of common security where we can decrease our military spending and use that money as a peace dividend to take care of what is really important to humanity. And that requires also working with our adversaries, those that we do not agree with. Ambassador Belloni, of course, mentioned China and the need to cooperate on climate change, but it goes much beyond that to all areas. And of course, also one of the big focuses we'll have is nuclear disarmament. We cannot live in a world where nuclear weapons continue to exist, whether it be a purposeful attack, accidental, or otherwise. Nuclear weapons are an existential threat to the entire planet that in a matter of seconds could change everyone's life on this planet. So we want to bring these issues forward, but also propose what steps we can take, how we can work towards creating that security together. And that will be the central theme of this final plenary, and hopefully also a way that we can tie in the different issues that we will discuss over the course of these 2 days, and together bring all of that into not just peace, but justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So I hope that we have you enthused enough. Darren, just the last words to close this session.
Sure, just wanted to thank our moderators for coming and explaining these wonderful sessions. I'm really excited to attend these and participate, and I really encourage everybody's frank participation, and being able to engage in these discussions is really invaluable, right, into advancing these issues. And so I hope that many of you do so. And I really look forward to hearing what everybody has to say. And I think we have one more thing before we go for lunch.
Yes, I would like to invite Beatrice Mariottini from IDOS to explain very quickly about a campaign and action which is needed from your side. So Beatrice, please, the podium is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to Rome. My name is Beatrice Mariottini, and I work for IDOS, the Italian Association for Women in Development. And today we are launching a campaign called A World Where. It is a campaign promoting sexual and reproductive health and rights organized by Countdown 2030, which is a consortium of European associations of which we are part of. And the campaign aims to drive Europe's commitment on SRHR to meet sustainable development goals, to foster gender equality and strengthen health systems. So you will find us here on the corridor. We have a small stand, and what we are asking from you is to give us a couple of minutes of your time to give us your contributions. We will give you a piece of paper where you can write your thoughts to imagine with us what a world where SRHR are effectively guaranteed for everyone globally, and what that would entail for you. We will be happy to gather your contributions and then present them to the G7 Sherpa, Elisabetta Belloni, to guarantee gender mainstreaming. And yes, please come visit us. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. So this session is closed. Now we have our lunchtime, and FAO messengers and other people will explain where you have to go. And see you at 2:30 in the different rooms. Thank you. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. The parallel session will start at 2 p.m. 2 p.m., not 2:30. 2 p.m. Thanks a lot.